Our infrastructure is crumbling, and it's not just our roads and bridges, it's about public transit. I've been a transit operator here for 6 years, but the long hours became too much. I have three children aged 5, 6, and 12, and needed to be home more, so I recently transferred to maintenance department, where I could work 8 hours, go home for baseball games, basketball games, and just be a dad.
이거 얘기하는 거예요?
We have 2 electric buses here at the KCATA, and with the infrastructure bill, I'm sure we'll be getting many more.
이거 얘기하는
Soon our
거예요?
entire fleet will be electric, and I want to ensure that I have the skill set to fix and maintain these vehicles. Thankfully, thanks to the Biden team, the bill sets aside $500 million for training. The transit systems must use this money for workforce development for people like me. It's a really big deal.
테슬라가 지금 일단 이거 좀 켜야겠다. 헤드폰 좀 킬게요. 잠시만요.
But that's what you'd expect from the most pro-labor, pro-transit president in America.
일단 바이든을 추앙하는 말을 하고 있고요.
Since January, he's brought hope, compassion, and leadership to the White House. He brought America back just in time.
바이든을 잘하고 있다는 얘기를
Ladies
하고
and gentlemen,
있는데
please welcome the President of the United States and former school bus driver, Joe Biden.
와, 일론 머스크가 대놓고 까고 있네요. 와, 일론이 기침했네.
Well, I tell you what, I don't know where that phrase, it's a big deal, came from. If anybody remembers that, which you seem to all remember, after the president spoke, and I spoke after, then President Obama,
재밌는데?
he was back to my right. And I went back and I made sure I was talking on his left ear because it was all he was down the hallway. And I whispered what I said.
잠깐만요. 이거 재밌는데
How in
일론이
God's
지금
name
대놓고
anybody
비비비
heard it,
까고
I have no
있네요.
idea.
오, 잠시만.
And I
이걸
shouldn't
어떻게
waste
갖고 와야
your
되지?
time and tell you this, but we were going to go from there over the Department of
잠시만요. 이거
Transportation.
보여드려야겠네.
No, excuse me,
일론이
Department of Education.
실시간으로 이거를 까고 있네.
I walked out the back and got in a presidential limo.
와,
on the-
일론
on the
대단한데?
driver's side, the back seat. The president, he was already in there, and he was laughing like the devil. He was almost hysterical. I said, "What's so damn funny?" And he told me. And I said, "You're just lucky my mother's not alive. I'd be one dead man." Look, before I began, I'd like to say a word about a friend of mine who we lost this weekend. Man, a few hours west of Russell, Kansas, came from an hour not far from here, Russell, Kansas. A lot of Americans today remember Bob Dole as a presidential candidate, but for families he represented across the border, he represented Kansas for 36 years. And for those like me who had the honor of calling him a friend, Bob Dole was an American giant,
저렇게 됐으면
man of
어떡할 텐데.
extraordinary courage, both physical and moral courage. A war hero who sacrificed beyond measure, who nearly gave his life for our country in World War II. Among the greatest of the great generation, a leader of honesty, decency, and good humor. The same qualities that made him such a cherished friend to me and my wife Jill, and so many others through the years. We didn't agree on everything, but I always admired and respected him and his willingness to work with anyone, any party, when it mattered most. And our nation owes Bob Dole a debt of gratitude for the remarkable service and a life well lived. And being here this week reminds me of another great American giant, or rather an American monarch, Buck O'Neil, the Kansas City Monarchs. A great ball player, the first black coach in the majors, one of the game's greatest ambassadors, and finally, a Hall of Famer. Now, if the sun shined a little brighter on Kansas City this week, is because Bob and Buck are up there sharing a laugh with one another. I also want to acknowledge Mayor Quinton Lucas. Mayor Q, you've done an amazing job, both in terms of economic justice as well as economic progress. And I want to thank County Executive Frank Wright. He lived the life I'd hoped to live. He started off as a laborer. He helped build the Royal Stadium. As a player, he's one of the best to ever play there. And now he's a county executive in Jackson County, resident and a business
저렇게 대놓고 라이브 하는 도중에
as well.
깐다고?
You know, I mean, this guy's done it all. I thought maybe I could make him the pros, but look what the hell. I actually was foolish enough to ask Floyd Little whether he could get his, he was a friend of mine in Syracuse, if he could get his agent to see if I could walk on. You know, every year they allow 50 folks to walk on. Well, guess what? He said, he came back to me laughing. He said, my agent said they're afraid if they let you walk on, they'd have to just carry you off. Look, the infrastructure law I signed Thanksgiving would not be possible, and this is not hyperbole, without the leaders here today. Congressman Emanuel Cleaver was a great mayor, a significant leader in the House. Before he's both those things, he was a pastor. And he saw a highway cut through the neighborhood many of his congregants call home. So he knows that we need to build our infrastructure the right way, not just build it, but build it the right way. He also is a big reason Kansas City is adding electric buses to this fleet. Zero fare, zero emissions. Congressman, great idea. Great idea. And Congresswoman Sharice Davids, there is no stronger advocate for infrastructure investment in the United States Congress that I've ever met anyway. And as Vice Chair of the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee, your leadership was key in getting this passed. So I want to thank you. There you are. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I also want to thank somebody else, Roy Blunt. He couldn't be here today, but he was an important part of the bipartisan effort to get the infrastructure passed. And that's what we're here about. We're here talking about rebuilding America, investing in America, building a better America. In the coming weeks, I'm going to be traveling all over the country, and so will Vice President Harris, my cabinet, and folks throughout our administration. Our Building a Better America tour is going to give us a chance to meet people where they work, and hear what the communities that they live in, what they need, hear firsthand, and showcase how our bipartisan infrastructure law, which has changed their lives for the better, came about because we worked together. We can learn more about this law and what it means for your community. Go to build.gov. Look, the better part of the 20th century, we led the world by a significant margin in our willingness to invest in ourselves, We invested in our infrastructure. We invested in research and development, in our roads, highways, bridges, ports, airports. The arteries of the nation allow commerce to function smoothly and move swiftly. And we invested in our people. We gave opportunity. We're among the first to provide access to universal education and high school education at the beginning of the 20th century, which put us in the forefront of leading the rest of the world. We invested to win the space race, and we won it. We led the world in research and development, led the creation of the internet. But we know that China and the rest of the world are catching up, and in some respects, actually moving beyond us. We're also going to reinvest in our country and our people to reclaim our leadership, to create millions of jobs by building a better America with the best infrastructure in the world, built overwhelmingly with prevailing wage, union. There's a lot of good and decent people in the finance industry, but they didn't build the middle class. Unions built the middle class. No, not a joke, not a political statement. It's a reality. It's a reality. And look, this infrastructure bill, which without the union's support behind me to get this done, would have never gotten done. It starts with the most significant investment in roads and bridges in America in 70 years, fixing many of those 3,500 bridges, nearly 10,000 miles of roads in Kansas and Missouri in poor condition, like the Central Avenue Bridge, which was closed earlier this year for fear of failure. A similar bridge not far from here going to Kentucky, there was fear of failure, and it collapsed, killing a whole heck of a lot of people. But this created a whole lot of headaches, wasted time for 8,500 people who used to drive it every single day. The decaying roads cost Missouri and Kansas drivers more than $500 per person per year, the drivers, and additional gas and repairs and longer commute times, and more than $500 in hidden tax on Kansas and Missouri families. And speaking of the cost of living, 2 weeks ago, I announced the largest ever release of the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve to increase the supply of oil to help bring down prices. And I met with our friends around the world. Other countries joined us. And those savings are starting to reach drivers. Now, today, the average price you're paying here in Kansas City is below $2 a gallon, $3 a gallon. It's down to $2.90 a gallon, 20% down from a month ago. Nationally, prices are down 7 cents a gallon and continue to fall. We're making progress. We're going to keep at it to ensure the American people are paying their fair share for gas, not being gouged for gas. And look, as Manuel said, we're in a situation where we've known that our infrastructure had problems for a long, long time. I don't think I could take one more phrase that's going to be infrastructure week. But guess what? It's going to be infrastructure decade now, man. No more talking. Action. The law also includes the most significant investment in passenger rail in 50 years, $66 billion for passenger and freight rail. You know, I was talking with members about improving cross-state, interstate passenger rail, something I know a little about. I've been doing it for a long time. You know, the fact is that you're looking at Mr. Amtrak here. I've traveled over, this is God's truth, I've traveled over 1,250,000 miles on Amtrak. Everybody thought that, anyway, because I went home every single night after my wife and daughter were killed because I couldn't afford a home in Delaware and in Washington. So I commuted every day. I remember one day, as vice president, the government keeps fastidious records of how many miles you travel on government planes. And so there's a big headline. Biden travels, I forget it was, 1 million miles on Air Force Two and so on and so forth. And I'm getting on the train to go home, which the Secret Service, they're great. They're with me here today, all 800 of you. But all kidding aside, they're wonderful. And I was getting on the train because they didn't like me getting on the train, Congressman, because it's more dangerous circumstance. You can stop people and fix on tracks, etc. But I would go going home to see my mom, who was sick. And one of the conductors I know for years walked up and grabbed, said, "Joey, baby," grabbed my cheek. And not a joke. And I thought that he was going to get shot. True story. And I said, no, it's okay. We've known each other. He said, "Joey, big deal.
아, 이거.
1 million miles, or wherever it was, 1 million miles on Air Force Two. Come on, Joey. You know how many miles you travel on Amtrak?" I said, "No, Angie, I don't know how many miles." He said, we calculated it at the retirement dinner. He said, 36 years, 119 days a year, back and forth. Then as vice president, he said, we figure you've done X number of trips. It adds up to 1,200,000 miles on Amtrak. And I said, if my dad were here, he'd call it a misspent adulthood. But all kidding aside, you know, back in the early 70s, probably 74, I think it was, there was a guy named Charlie Wheeler who talked about this, your mayor. Seriously. And there's no reason why it should be
근데
2
다른
hours
주에서
faster
얘기하는 거라서
drive from Kansas City to St. Louis than take a train. No reason. All the data shows that if you get from point A to point B at a faster rate by rail than by automobile, you'll take the rail. And guess what that does? First of all, it's safer, but secondly, it's going to save over time millions of barrels of oil. Millions of barrels of oil because it's electric. Look, folks, we're the largest investment in public transit ever in this legislation. It means replacing buses that are past their useful life,
현철인가? 저게
switching from
기차랑
diesel to
철도라기보다
electric, getting more people where they're trying to go more safely, faster, cleaner, like what you're doing here with your zero fare, zero emission buses. Electric buses, you add into the fleet, it's a win-win-win. They're manufactured here in America, creating good union jobs. They're good for the environment, and they're making them free for all riders. Mayor, you're helping regular riders save about $2,000 a year. That's a big deal for someone making 50, 60 grand a year. An infrastructure law means more projects like the extension of the Kansas City streetcar, so you can connect Union Station with UMKC and everything in between. It means students can easily get to internships and jobs in downtown core. It means families can get to restaurants, stores, the plaza, to read the riverfront, to catch the Kansas City Current game at the new stadium, the first stadium, by the way, I might specifically point out, specifically built for women's soccer. I was able to see them win the Olympic. Anyway, it's a long story, but it means more jobs, opportunity, economic development. The law invests $42 billion to modernize our ports and airports in America. Like the new terminal you're building in Kansas City International, or improvements to the island port in the Missouri River, helping get agricultural products from the Midwest to the rest of the nation. And this bill has $16 billion in it to improve ports like yours. These investments make it easier for companies to get their goods to market, reducing supply chain bottlenecks, lowering costs for families. Here in Kansas City, the possibilities are unlimited. You got the fastest growing port in the Midwest. You're in the heart of the heartland for freight rail, for transforming your airport. You're building a national hub, create a cycle of jobs and growth that will be felt for decades, making the right investments. And you have the money to do it now. Of course, that's not all the law achieves. Under the leadership of mayors like, our mayor here, KC Water has going to replace all known service lines in Kansas City, but there's more work to be done in the region. The law starts by replacing all 100% of the nation's lead pipes and service lines, so every child in Missouri and Kansas and across America can turn on that faucet. In the 4,000 schools, you can't do it. 44,000, I should say. And drink clean, decent water. You're going to need tens of thousands of plumbers and pipe fitters making a union wage to undo this. You get paid a prevailing wage with benefits, the ability to build a middle-class life.
일론이 트윗
I grew up like a lot of you did. I grew up in a nice 3-bedroom split-level home in a development of about 70 other homes like
일론
it,
계속 트윗한다.
with 4 kids and a grandpa living with us. But I remember every time something would happen, my dad, I remember
일론
when
계속
he lost his
입터는
health insurance company. You could tell the walls were thin, how upset he was that night, just rolling in bed. Remember asking my mom, what's the matter? He said, we don't have health insurance for a while, honey. Well, my dad used to say, everybody deserves just a little bit of breathing room. A little bit of breathing room. This law is going to make high-speed internet affordable and available everywhere in America, creating jobs, deploying those broadband lines. Across the high-speed internet, access to high-speed internet unlocks opportunity everywhere. It allows farmers in Kansas to use precision agriculture to improve their yields, or a doctor in St. Louis to have a remote checkup with a homebound cancer patient. Today, roughly 1 of every 4 Missourians and 1 out of every 6 in Kansas don't have high-speed internet in their home. In some places, there's no broadband infrastructure at all. This law will make high-speed internet affordable and available everywhere in Missouri and Kansas, urban, suburban, and rural. In the 21st century in America, no parent should have to do what many had to do last semester, and that is sit in the parking lot of a fast food restaurant so their children could use the internet to get their homework done. This is the United States of America, for God's sake. This law also builds out a resilience against extreme weather events fueled by climate change. Nationally last year, extreme weather events cost this country $99 billion. And I toured most of it. I was out in California. You know, more forests burned to the ground than the entire square mileage of the state of New Jersey from the Cape all the way up to New York City, Long Island. That's how much we lost. And it goes on. Missouri and Kansas are no strangers to these effects. In fact, Missouri and Kansas were both in the top 10 states in the U.S. last year for power outages. Then Texas saw the massive blackouts last winter. Because you're on the Southwest power grid, you lost power too. This summer, you saw heavy storms close roads in Waverly, Kansas, cause flooding in St. Joseph to Columbia to Jefferson City. And when you think about the impact of more intense weather, more severe storms, none of us are ever going to forget the devastation in Joplin. In 2014, I went there to help reopen the rebuilt Joplin High School. On that day, I told the people of Joplin, we never break, we never stop. We Americans always rebuild, and we will rebuild this country. And this law builds back our bridges, our water systems, our power lines, electric grids, better, stronger, and more resistant to the negative effects of climate change. Because, by the way, it used to be, as the elected officials here can tell you, if you had storm damage and you qualified for federal aid, you got them just enough amount of money to get you back to exactly what it looked like before. But you can't do that because now that highway gets flooded out. It's never going to go back to less rain because of global warming. Pray God it won't get worse. So you got to build that highway a couple feet higher. It costs more money. You got to build back better. There's so much more in this law. And most of all, the law does something truly historic. The law helps rebuild when I announced for office, I said I was running for 3 reasons. 1, to restore the soul of this country, a sense of decency and honor. 2, to rebuild the backbone of this country, working class and hardworking middle class people. That's the backbone of this country. And thirdly, to unite the country, which is turning out to be one of the most difficult things we're going to get it done. Look, the fact of the matter is that we've been able to do an awful lot. We've built America, and we've left behind so much for so long. We're going to help rebuild the economy, this time from the bottom up and the middle out. You know, this bill is a blue-collar blueprint for working Americans. 95% of the jobs created in the infrastructure bill don't require a college education. The only way this works is blue-collar Americans do the building. And the only way it ever worked, we're going to do it again. Mark my words, we're going to do this again. And the same goes my plan to build back better for our people. This bill is going to deliver, for example, universal pre-K for every 3- and 4-year-old in America. One study great universities have done a lot of studies on this in the last decade. One study shows that low-income children from poor homes participating in preschool are 47% more likely to go on to earn an associate's degree or higher after high school. They start off at a great disadvantage because their mom or their dad, a single parent, doesn't have the education, doesn't have the training. But at 3 years old, the brain is rapidly developing so quickly, it matters. We have to build that foundation for the future, for success. My wife, Jill, is a full-time teacher. And, you know, she says any nation that out-educates us is going to out-compete us. It's simply a fact. And guess what? Hold it here. Every nation of the 38 most advanced nations, we rank 34 in the world. 34 in the world in early education for children. The United States of America. My Build Back Better plan, which is passed in the House of Representatives thanks to my two colleagues here today, representatives will also ensure that parents can afford child care. Child care gets workers the raise, and child care workers get a raise they deserve. Folks, look, in Missouri and Kansas, the average annual cost to send a toddler to child care is $6,500 a year. If you live in Chicago, it's more like $22,000 a year per child, okay? It means that the average family with two young children is spending roughly 20% of their after-tax income on child care. $20 out of every $100 they have. Our Build Back Better bill is going to make a giant difference in life because your child care cost will be capped at 7% of your income, period. That's 7% of your income. It's going to make a huge difference in millions of workers who've had to drop out of the workforce, not because they didn't want to work, but because they couldn't find affordable care. Look at all the women who are totally qualified who had to drop out of the workforce because they can't afford the child care and still work. Look, folks, you know, it's not the same, but I started about commuting. One of the reasons I started commuting was when I got elected, my family was killed. My wife and daughter were killed. I couldn't afford to leave Delaware because I had sisters, my best friend, my brother, my mother, my father helped me raise my kids. I was making good money. I was making $42,000 a year as a senator. I could no more afford full-time child care than fly. We're going to make college more affordable. Right now, the cost of a two-year degree in Missouri is over $4,000 a year. In Kansas, it's over $3,000 a year. There are about 140,000 students in these two states that rely on what we call Pell Grants. They make less than 50 grand a year Pell Grants to help cover the cost. This plan I have also is going to increase Pell Grants by $550 a year. It makes it easier to stay in school. It makes a big difference. We're also going to lower prescription drug prices. This week, I spoke to a young woman who told me the cost of insulin for her diabetes, she has stage type 1 diabetes, meant having to choose between rent, groceries, and medication. She said, relentlessly, without relief every day. So she couldn't do it. So she began to ration her supply of insulin. She ended up in a coma and almost died. Think about that. The difference between nearly dying and thriving is the cost of one drug that cost $10 to make years ago. Nothing's changing it. That can cost consumers now $1,000 a month. Well, so if you're one of those Americans who are paying too much for insulin, my Build Back Better plan is going to change that too, because you're going to guarantee you pay no more than $35 a month. It'd be different if they invested another $1,500 in research. They did nothing to change it. They'll make sure parents of the 200,000 children in America with type 1 diabetes have the ability, the parent to have the ability to say to a child, honey, it's going to be okay. Can you imagine the dignity you'll be deprived as a parent, knowing your child has type 1 diabetes and you can't afford their insulin? You can't afford it because you don't have insurance and your state doesn't have Medicare. Look, it's all about what working and middle class people have to pay to get by, to get ahead, to get, as my dad said, that little bit of breathing room. My whole plan is designed to bring down the cost you face. For example, lower cost for childcare, making you don't pay more than 7% of your income. Means a family making $50,000 a year will save $3,000 a year on child costs. Lowering the cost of prescription drugs, making sure you pay no more than $35 a month. For instance, not $1,000 a month. Saving $600 per person per year for healthcare premiums. The list goes on. Elder care, housing, meeting the moment of climate change. That's what this plan does. All in. Study found that my plan would mean the equivalent of $7,400 in tax cuts and savings for the typical family of 4 with 2 kids. And guess what? Let's talk about inflation. It's real. There's inflation. But 17 Nobel winners of the economics have written a letter just about 3 weeks ago to me affirming that this bill would ease long-term inflationary pressures in the economy. 2 of the leading rating agencies in the world, the Wall Street Journal, confirmed my plans do not add to inflationary pressures. Not liberal think tanks, Wall Street, Moody's, and anyway. Look, I have also proposed, what I proposed is in a way to lower some of the difficult costs families have to pay every month by asking corporations and the wealthiest Americans to pay their fair share for a change. Look, right now, everybody talks about the price tag for this legislation. $1.75 trillion. It will not cost the taxpayers a penny. If you're making less than $400 grand a year, you're not going to have your taxes go up 1 single penny, not a cent. And guess what else? It also means that there is no increase in your taxes, and people are going to just pay a fair share. For example, there are 50 corporations in America the last 3 years of the Fortune 500 that made $40 billion that didn't pay 1 single solitary penny, not 1 single penny in taxes. Come on, folks. It used to be during the last Bush administration, the top rate for the top 1% paid 37.5%. It got lowered to 36%. It doesn't have any impact. It just means whether or not they're going to have an extra swimming pool to the extra home. But all kidding aside, if you just take it from 36 back up to 37.5, it pays for every bit of preschool, and it pays for every bit of what we're talking about in terms of insulin. Now, what's better for American corporations? What's better for the wealthy? For a healthier nation, everybody being better educated, or having that extra amount of money that they already have a great deal of? I'm a capitalist. I have a good friend of Bernie's, but we disagree. I'm not a socialist. I'm a capitalist. You should be able to make $1 million or $100 million if you can, but pay your fair share. Folks, look, there's so much we can do, so many things that are within our power. If you went to the average American family making 60 to 70 grand, or you went to a family where dad was a teacher and mom was a police officer, they're making 120, they're paying at a higher tax rate than someone making $1 trillion. $1 billion. For real. How can that be fair? Look, one of the reasons I feel so firmly in the proposals is because I know what this country can be. We've always been a nation of possibilities. We didn't become this nation by thinking small. We've always thought big. Throughout our history, we've emerged from crisis by investing in ourselves, in our people. During the Civil War, before it was over, Lincoln started to build the Transcontinental Railroad. It was built at the end of and during the Civil War. During the Cold War, Eisenhower built the interstate highway system, transforming the way Americans lived. And now we're at work beginning and building an economy of the 21st century to build a better America. I truly believe, and I promise you this, I believe that 50 years from now, when historians look back on this moment, they're going to say this was the moment that America won the competition for the 21st century. Think about it. Most of you who are over 40 remember us always having the #1 infrastructure in the world, the best education, etc. We rank now number 8 in the world in terms of investment in research and development. 14th in infrastructure. The United States of America. And if you're a businessman out there, or you work, or you're a union person working for a business, where's the business going to go? Where they can get the products to market fastest, safest, where they have access to get in and out, where they have access to move. That's why we're losing. That's why we're losing. But we're not going to lose anymore. I promise you. The time of losing is over. It's over, 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 over. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
감사합니다. 자, 일단 오늘 바이든의 내용에 딱히 중요한 건 없었네요. 전에 했던 내용을 그대로 일단 사람들의 감정을 고취시키는 느낌으로 이야기를 했는데 새로운 내용은 없었고요. 저번에 제가 그냥 올린 내용 그대로 갖다 썼다고 보면 될 것 같아요. 뉴저지에서 썼던 연설을 그대로 썼고요. 이게 약 한 달 전에 있었던 연설인데 거의 토시 하나 안 다르고 똑같은 것 같아요. 그거는. 자, 아무튼 네, 끝난 것 같아요. 일단 그리고 우리 일론 머스크 형님의 트위터가 어떻게 됐냐? 자, 우리 일론 머스크 형님. 일론 머스크 형님 대단하셔. 와우, 아이 대놓고 이렇게 그래도 그게 마지막이네. 다행이다. 더 이상의 더 이상의 트위터는 없네. 자, 일단 이렇게 모든 일들이 마무리가 됐고요. 여러분들의 각자의 정치적 의견은 존중하긴 합니다만 다른 분들도 다른 의견을 가질 수도 있다는 거 서로에게 이야기를 할 때 만약에 다른 분이 다른 의견을 가지고 있다고 욕만 안 해주셨으면 좋겠어요. 자, 일단 여러분들이 많은 분들이 질문을 해주셨던 부분들에 대해서 이야기를 할게요. 제가 몇 번 커버를 해드리긴 했는데 전기차 보조금이 이미 지금 당장 대량 생산이 가능하고 마진율이 높은 테슬라 입장에서는 달가운 게 아닙니다. 자, 이재용이 문재인 깐 거죠. 맞아요. 일론이 주식이 왜 늘어났냐? 일론이 옵션을 실행했기 때문에 일단 그것 때문이고요. 자, 일단 여기에 대해서 얘기를 해볼게요. 자, 여러분 요거는 블룸버그에서 얘기한 내용이에요. 자, 전기차 보조금이 이미 지금 당장 대량 생산이 가능하고 마진율이 높은 테슬라 입장에서는 왜냐면은 일단 이게 제한이 있어요. 회사마다 챙길 수 있는 제한이 있습니다. 그래서 테슬라는 금방 채워. 그럼 다른 회사들 대량 생산의 마진이 안 좋은 회사들은 어떨까? 그들이 심지어 노조까지 쓴다면 그러면 테슬라의 파이를 테슬라와 가격 경쟁이 좀 되기 시작하겠죠? 가격 경쟁이 되기 시작할 거고 그러면 테슬라의 마켓 쉐어는 좀 줄어들 수밖에 없다. 그러나 마켓 파이 자체는 커질 가능성이 있다. 마켓 쉐어와 마켓 파이가 아니라 마켓의 사이즈, 마켓 자체는 커질 가능성이 있다. 이렇게 보면 될 것 같아요. 자, 여러분들 이런 식으로 생각하시면 될 것 같습니다. 자, 여러분들 테슬라가 지금 현재 당연히 모든 마켓에 가장 큰 지분을 차지하고 있을 거예요. 근데 그 지분 자체가 이 플랜이 통과가 됨으로써 테슬라보다는 전체 모든 회사가 좋아지는 거거든요. 근데 이미 테슬라는 이미 대량 생산 체제와 그리고 심지어 높은 마진을 남길 수 있는 거를 이미 만들어 놨어. 그런 환경을 만들어 놨는데 이미 이 보조금에 대해서 사실상 테슬라는 받아먹기 시작하면 금방 끝납니다. 다른 회사들은 어때? 대량 생산에 지금 막 들어가는 회사도 있고 대량 생산이 없는 회사들도 있고 지금 당장 마진이 안 좋은 회사들도 있는데 그런 회사들이 테슬라와 가격 경쟁을 조금 더 심화할 수 있겠지. 어차피 그들은 아무리 많이 팔아봤자 테슬라만큼 못 파니까. 테슬라만큼 많이 대량 생산이 불가능하니까 그러다 보니까요. 이제 만약에 일론 머스크가 아니라 테슬라가 만약에 이 보조금이 이제 런아웃 이제 끝나게 된다면 사실상 노조를 쓸 것도 아니기 때문에 일론 머스크 입장에서는 노조를 싫어하거든요. 극혐합니다. 그렇기 때문에 노조를 쓰는 다른 회사들 입장에서는 조금 더 경쟁이 유리해질 수밖에 없는 거죠. 그러다 보면 테슬라의 마켓 지분은 조금 줄어들 수 있다. 뭐 테슬라의 판매 대수가 줄어든다는 게 아니에요. 테슬라의 마켓 지분이 줄어들고 마켓 자체는 원래보다 더 커질 가능성은 있는 거죠. 비트코인이요? 비트코인은 아직 제가 조금 더 봐야 될 것 같아요. 지금 방금 조금 자고 일어나가지고, 사실 조금, 아까 있던 그, 뭐죠? 크립토 커런시 청문회, 암호화폐 청문회를 아직 다 못 봤거든요. 한번 보고 말씀드리도록 할게요. 자, 머스크 형이 대놓고, 인프라 플랜을 깠어요. 예, 머스크 형이 인프라 플랜은 빚을 늘리는 플랜이고, 사실상 여기에 숨겨진 히든 세금들, 히든 피들이 많다. 힘들어진 돈 쓰는 출처가 많다. 라고 이야기하면서 이 Build Back Better 플랜, 인프라 플랜을 연설하는 도중에 그냥 트위터로 후딱 때려버렸습니다. 지금 머리가 좀 돌아가질 않네. 이런. 일단 비트코인 관련 이야기는 한번 제가 찾아보도록 할게요. 자, 일단 여러분들 이렇게 중요한 부분들은 다 커버를 해드렸고요. 한번 블룸버그에서 어떤 내용이 올라와 있는지 마지막으로 한번 봅시다. 제가 그래도 좀 있으면 꺼야 되니까 그 전에 오늘 다행히 중요한 이야기는 나온 게 없어요. 다행히 중요한 이야기는 나온 게 없고 바이든이 나토하고 NATO하고 지금 러시아와 우크라이나의 이제 긴장을 풀어주기 위해서 좀 이야기를 하고 있다 이런 얘기하고 있고요. 글쎄 오늘은 다행히 중요한 내용이 없네요. 중요한 내용이 있었으면 제가 아픈 몸을 끌고서라도 여러분들한테 알려드리긴 해야 되는데 그나마 다행입니다. 자, 근데 이거는 어쩔 수 없는 게 글쎄요, 약간 그런 거지. 바이든 입장에서는 당연히 가장 많은 사람들의 투표를 받아야 하고 그 투표권자가 제일 집중돼 있는 곳은 중산층입니다. 부자들이 아무리 돈이 많아봤자 그들이 쓸 수 있는 투표권에는 한계가 있어요. 그렇다면은 바이든은 가장 많은 사람들의 이익을 대변해야 되는 사람들이고 그 가장 많은 사람들은 아무래도 노동자 계층 아니면 중산층 계층이 될 수밖에 없죠. 보조금 아직 확정 아니에요. 보조금을 하지 말라고 하는 거예요. 테슬라가 보조금 하지 말라고 하는. 테슬라가 아니지. 일론이 나라면 보조금 법안 취소한다라고 했어요. 말씀드린 것처럼 보조금 법안이 회사로서 분명히 돈을 더 버는 데는 이득은 되지만 마켓 쉐어, 마켓 지분율에 관해서 안 좋은 악영향이 있을 가능성이 크기 때문에 사실상 테슬라 입장에선 보조금 법안이 없는 게 아무래도 이 마켓 쉐어를 지켜가면서 계속해서 커져가는 게 아마 테슬라 입장에서 더 좋을 거라 생각을 해요. 그래서 블룸버그에서 이렇게 얘기를 했어요. 지금 일론 머스크가 취하고 있는 입장은 테슬라가 갖고 있는 미션, 테슬라 갖고 있는 이 회사의 비전과는 맞지 않다. 회사의 비전은 이 전기차를 통해서 환경오염을 줄이는 것이 목적이라고 일론이 얘기했는데 일론 너는 막상 이 마켓을 커지게 만들 수 있는 이 저 법안에 반대한다라는 식으로 이야기가 블룸버그에 나왔더라고요. 참 어쨌건 뭐 여러분들 이렇게 중요한 얘기들 다 나눠봤고요. 오늘 다행히 장들이 좋아가지고 많은 분들이 오늘 이득을 많이 보셨을 것 같은데 오늘 다행히 중요한 뉴스들이 없이 후두두두두 지나가서 다행히 몸이 아픔에도 불구하고 다행히 라이브 방송을 딱 2번 번역 방송만 키게 된 것 같아요. 자, 테슬라는 보조금 줍니다. 테슬라도 받는데 문제는 테슬라가 받을 수 있는 보조금에는 한계가 있어요. 모든 회사들은 받을 수 있는 보조금에 한계가 있는데 결국 테슬라가 가장 대량 생산이 많기 때문에 테슬라가 가장 빨리 떨어진단 말이에요, 보조금이. 그렇기 때문에 마켓 쉐어, 다시 말씀드리지만 마켓 지분에 악영향이 생길 수밖에 없다. 자, 일단 여러분들 여기까지 일단 하고 일단 마무리를 짓도록 할게요. 일단 뭐 많은 분들이 아시겠지만 노조를 지어야지 보조금을 4,500불이나 더 준더라고요. 노조가 없으면 보조금은 7,500에서 마무리. 만약에 노조가 있으면 거기서 4,500불을 더 줘서 12,000불까지 받을 수 있는데 차이가 꽤 많이 나죠. 7,000불과 12,000불이라는 거는 꽤 많은 금액의 차이가 있습니다. 차 가격에도 큰 영향을 줄 거고요. 그러다 보니까 지금 일론이 싫어하고 반대할 수밖에 없다. 그렇죠, 그렇죠, 그렇죠. 여러분들 어쨌건 오늘 다들 수고하셨고요. 오늘은 좀 일찍 끄도록 할게요. 아 진짜 오늘 너무 컨디션이 안 좋네. 여러분들이 있기 때문에 제가 이렇게 안 좋은 컨디션에서 여러분과 같이 이야기를 할 수 있는 것 같아요. 원래 이맘때쯤이면 보통 아드레날린이 도는데 오늘 근육통이 너무 심해가지고 이게 아드레날린이 돌아도 몸이 지끈지끈 거예요. 야, 당연히 주면 좋지. 주면 받지. 주면 받지만 안 주면 더 좋지. 약간 이런 느낌이지. 자, 아무튼 여러분들 여기까지 하고 마무리 짓도록 할게요. 여러분들 오늘 너무 수고하셨고요. 만약에 또 중요한 뉴스 뜨게 되면 여러분 또 방송 켜서 레카 끌고 나오도록 하겠습니다. 여러분들 사실상 지금 제가 이렇게 라이브 방송을 킨 이유는요. 많은 분들이 댓글로 사실 이 바이든 방송이랑 코인 방송 좀 라이브로 번역해 줄 수 있어요? 라고 댓글을 주셔서 제가 이렇게 나온 거니까요. 이런 것처럼 제가 항상 여러분들의 댓글을 잘 읽어보고 당연히 그런 부분들에서 중요하다고 생각되면 바로바로 라이브 켜서 제보 들어오는 대로 바로바로 커버해드리고 있으니까 항상 여러분들 좋아요, 구독과 알림 설정 눌러주시고 댓글까지 써주시면 제가 매일매일 그 댓글을 찾아보고 있습니다. 많은 분들 아시겠지만 다시 말씀드리자면 저는 제 이름을 제 유튜브 아이디를 항상 네이버나 구글에서 쳐봐요. 그래서 여러분들이 무슨 글을 쓰고 있냐, 무슨 댓글을 쓰고 있냐 이렇게 다 두 눈 뜨고 감시하고 있으니까 항상 좋은 재밌는 댓글 아니면 제보 항상 잘 적어주시면 제가 항상 쳐다보고 읽어보고 있으니까 항상 여러분들 궁금하신 점 있으면 항상 문의로 달아주시기 바랍니다. 항상 여러분들 다들 너무 수고하셨고요. 여기까지 하고 저는 마무리 짓도록 할게요. 오늘 너무 원래 이것보다 텐션 높여야 되는데 오늘 너무 힘이 들어가지고 텐션이 너무 구리네. 여러분들 텐션 다시 높여서 조금 몸 회복해서 내일 다시 찾아뵙도록 하는 유사남 되도록 하겠습니다. 여러분들 여기까지 유명해지고 싶은 남자, 유능해지고 싶은 남자, 유재석이 되고 싶은 남자 유튜버 유사남이었고요. 여러분들 좋아요, 구독과 알림 설정 꼭 눌러주시고 매주 주말 열리는 정기 라이브 방송도 꼭 참석해 주셔서 저와 재밌는 주제 이야기 나누시면서 같이 수다 떨 수 있는 시간을 가지시길 바랍니다. 여러분들 여기까지 유저지에 산 남자, 유익한 정보를 사랑하는 남자